got sucked into that, didn't I?
You did.
Thanks.
Anyhow, allow me to lighten the mood a bit. Some
Yeah.
of these bits here touch the heartstrings. This guy needed a cigarette in the shower after his. Anyhow, meeting new friends in the workplace can be a pleasant, unexpected surprise. During the 4 years I worked at Burger King, I met a lot of interesting people and made a lot of good friends over the years. However, they can't all be good eggs, and there is one man in particular I wish I had avoided from the start, my manager, Matt. Though he was a grown man, in the end he pulled some childish buffoonery that would go down as the most embarrassing incident in the Burger King history book. Now, Matt seemed like a decent fellow when he first hired me. Aside from the fact that he would come into work filthy and intoxicated, he could actually be a lot of fun. He was certainly the only manager we could play broom hockey with, and he would let me take unlimited cigarette breaks. He also let me take food for free and give some out to people I knew. And the only thing he asked in return was friendship. Looking back, it seems like having some boundaries between managers and employees would have been a good idea. But for years, the Burger King team operated as a family, so such boundaries were unnecessary. My best friend at the time was also a coworker, and we decided to get our own apartment since we were both tired of living with our parents, and we had extra cash because we were both working full-time. Our apartment soon became a hotspot for hearty partying, and our fellow employees were always welcome. In fact, when we first moved in, we invited everyone to stop by and check the place out whenever they wanted. Just about everyone came at some point, including Matt. Matt was the last person I would have ever expected to walk through my door bearing beer on a Friday night. This was most surely a recipe for disaster, but who was I to turn down free beer? He arrived with Mike, who also worked at Burger King, and like Matt, was middle-aged. For about an hour, everything was fine. A few other Burger King employees, mostly teenage, had been there when Matt and Mike arrived, and we all sat around drinking beer, laughing about our favorite BK memories. This state didn't last forever, however, and soon a full-blown party was in effect. Now, Matt was indeed an alcoholic, and in addition hadn't smoked marijuana in over 20 years. These were two key ingredients in our parties, and this volatile mix would prove fatal for Matt. I thought it would be funny to offer him a hit off my blunt, which, with a little prodding, he accepted. On the next rotation, he didn't have to be prodded. After the blunt was finished, I got up to go check out the party that was happening in my apartment. I left Matt on his own, which was one of the biggest mistakes I ever made in my life. I later found out he was asking anyone and everyone who was smoking for a few hits. At one of my parties, this quickly added up to an excessive amount, especially for someone who hasn't touched the stuff in 20 years. I was having a conversation with an old friend about 2.5 hours after Matt and Mike had arrived when I heard a shrill scream from the kitchen, where we held our beer pong games daily. I rushed in to see what the commotion was about. I saw my 16-year-old friend and coworker Sarah crying. When I asked what happened, it took a moment for her to struggle out, "Matt touched me!" before returning to sobbing. "Where'd he go?" I demanded furiously. The room was silent other than Sarah's sobs. A few people pointed to the door. Around the corner, I found Mike trying to communicate with Matt, who was sitting on the curb, his face a brighter red than his manager's uniform. My roommate soon followed. We all tried to talk some sense into Matt, who at this point eerily resembled a full-grown baby. The gibberish he was speaking didn't help things at all. When he finally lifted himself up, I imagined he was ready to admit his wrongdoings in groping Sarah, but instead he became even more belligerent and began furiously shouting curses and insults into my face. Fortunately for him, I was the peacekeeper of the house and was used to these kind of frustrating situations, so I didn't punch him directly in the face, as much as I wanted to. It certainly would have been easy. Instead, I gave him a few choice words of my own, pointing out how pathetic he looked, and then told him never to come back. I later found out that Mike took Matt back to his house and attempted to give him food, which he refused. Mike and his sister were then woken up about an hour later to Matt stumbling around the house and shouting that he wanted to go home. Mike was a more tender soul than I, but even he had a breaking point. Being woken up at 4 in the morning by his drunk and stoned manager proved enough, and he was kicked out of Mike's house. He somehow found his way home, which I informed was over 5 miles away. The immediate fallout of this incident was painful, but was eventually glossed over. Nobody forgot, however, and the legend of what happened that night was passed down to new employees until the day Burger King closed its doors due to bankruptcy. Thank God. My initial anger quickly turned to amusement, and even Sarah was laughing about it a mere few months after it had occurred. Matt was never able to live it down, however, and I believe that is one of the major factors that led him to quit 6 months later. Besides having a great story to tell, the best thing that came out of this incident was that Matt no longer had any power whatsoever over me at work. When he caught me smoking pot out back mid-shift, I blew a cloud of smoke in his face and walked back inside. He didn't say a word about it. The same isn't true about the tale of his tragic mistake, however, and it has been my pleasure sharing that tale with you all today.